Hey everyone, it's Neil. Today I'm going to show you how to calculate distances between the data you have on a Spotfire map and a reference point. Today I'm going to show you two examples. The first example shows these housing prices in Australia. As I hover over this, you can see in the bottom of the tooltip a distance, and all of these are calculated with a distance towards the center of the city. The farther the values are from the center, the more blue they are, the closer they are, the more red they are. The second example is actually going to be using geometry data like we see with these census districts in the New York City area. All of these have a distance calculated to this reference point, which is a star, and I can adjust the slider here to filter just to see the values that are closest to my star. Now, the other part about this demo is I can actually copy my map coordinates, and if I want to move my star, I want to move my reference point, I can go ahead and move that, and that will also change the data and all the calculations as well. So there's two examples here, and initially I thought about doing separate quick tip videos, but since they're so related, I later decided let's just put it all together and give you one big quick tip video today. The first one's only going to take 2 or 3 minutes, so if you're done after that, you can stop watching, or if you want to see the more advanced use case with the moving reference point, just keep watching for the rest of the video. All right, let's jump into the first example. So again, each of these points are a house, a townhome, an apartment, and they're colored by the distance to the center of the city. I'm going to remove my reference point. I'm going to make it right here. So I'm going to copy my map coordinates. And the next thing I want to do is add a calculated column. Now in my calculated column, I have spatial functions, and great circle distance is the one I want to use to calculate the distance between points. And there's some examples here of how to use it. And this calculates based off of the radius of the Earth. So what I want to do for different units is multiply my final value by 6371 to get kilometers, 3959 to get miles. You can use a different value for feet or whatever you need, meters. So let's go ahead and just insert this function. And the first thing I need to do is add my latitude and longitude columns. So I'll scroll down and I'll add latitude, and that's going to be each latitude value for each house in my data set or each residential location. I need to put a comma in there, and I need to put in longitude. And then I want to put in the values I copied to my clipboard. So I'm going to hit Control V and paste that. And I want this to be in kilometers. So I'll multiply this by 6371. And I'll just call this distance in kilometers. When I go to preview, I'll see my latitude and longitude as the source columns that were used, and my calculated value is distance column right here in kilometers. So I'll hit OK, and now this has been added. I can scroll over and I see distance in kilometers right there. And if I want, I could color by this. So this is already colored by the same value, but I can color this by distance in kilometers, and now we're seeing with that new location that I selected, those distance values calculated. So that's the simple use case. That's just the basic usage. So let's take this a step further. Let's look at my New York City values. Okay, here behind the scenes, I went ahead and removed my star, removed all the calculations so we can do this from scratch. So the first thing I have, let's go ahead and just show a table here of my New York City geometries. So these are the different census districts. And I need to take a center point of each of these geometries. So what I can do is in calculated columns for this demographics and spatial functions, I can add a envelope for the Y center and the X center. So the horizontal center point and the vertical center point. This might already be in your data set. A lot of shape files have this generated automatically, but if you don't have it, you can add it in here. So I'll just insert this function for X center, and let me add this geometry in. And that's going to give me a sample result here. So that is, or I can view the sample result here. So that's the X center values. I'll just call this X center. And let's go ahead and add a calculated column for the Y center as well. So spatial functions and Y center. And I'll add the geometry Y center. Okay, now I see in this table below the x-center and y-center values for each of these geometries. So to calculate a distance, it's going to be pretty similar, but I want to make a moving reference point. So the first thing I need to do is I actually need to make that as a new data table, and you can't just add a data table from scratch necessarily in Spotfire. You have to add it from an existing data table, but what you can do is add it from a clipboard. So what I'll do is say my reference point, or I'll say my reference, and I'll copy this. Now in data, I'll add data, and I'll go to other, and I'll paste the data from my clipboard. So now I have my reference. It doesn't have a column name here because I just had one value. I'll just name this as a location, and I'll hit OK. And now I just have a simple data table, which I'll say reference point. So let's see, reference point, not much going on here, just one value. Now I need to add some coordinates for this new location. So I'm just going to start with a random point. I'm going to right click and copy map coordinates, and I'm going to add this as a document property. So in File and Document Properties, I'll go to Property and I'll hit New, and I'm going to keep this as a string. When you copy it, it's a string value. I'll just call this new chords, and I'll put that value in. I'll just paste that in. So now I have a location right there. And I want to add that document property into this table with this reference point. So add calculated column. Let's go to reference point, and let's add for new coordinates, I want the latitude, and so that's going to be the first value. And so I need to use a split on the string, split function, and I'm going to right click and insert this as value. So it's going to split that, and it's going to split it by the comma space value. That's the separator, and I just want the first value here. So this is going to show just the so this is just going to show just the latitude value. Now, I don't want this to be in strings. I'm going to do calculation, so I'm going to cast this to a real value. It's a numerical value with decimal points, and I'll just call this latitude. And I'll hit OK, and now I have a latitude value right there. So let's do the same thing for longitude. I'm just going to insert this recent expression, but I'm going to choose the second value, and let's call this longitude. Okay, so now I have this location. Let's add it to the map. Let's go to Properties, Layers. Let's add a new layer, a marker layer, as my reference point table. And for positioning, I want to make sure this is longitude and latitude. Let's go ahead and take a look here. Let's make this size, let's make it a little bit, let's just make this a little bit bigger. And let's change the color here to yellow, and I'll change the shape to a star. Okay, so there's now my new point. Okay, so there's just my new point. Let's make this a little bit bigger here. All right. Okay, so you can see that point. Now, how do I change this? Well, in text areas, you can add what's called a property control. And I'm going to add that, it's just this little checkbox, this property control, and I'm going to make this an input field. And I'm going to tie that to new coordinates. So I'll hit OK here, and whatever goes into this input field is now going to be that document property value. Let me move this over there real quick. Okay. So what this means is if I copy the coordinates and I paste it in here, it's going to remove my star. It just changed those coordinates. It just redid those calculations in the calculate columns and replotted it on my map just by changing that. Very simple. So now I want to be able to calculate the distances between my different geometries and this point, and they're in separate data tables. I'm going to go to Data and add calculated columns. In my New York City demographics table with all my districts, I'm going to use the Great Circle Distance function. And I'm going to do my Y center, comma, my X center. And then I want to use my document property value. So my new coordinates here, I can right click and insert as a value. Now that's just gonna be the whole string, remember. So I need to split this out and I wanna make it a real. So I'll do real and then split. I wanna split this document property by comma space, and I want the first value. And then next thing I want is, I want to be able to do the same thing, but I want to do it with the second value there. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it, and let's do the second value. And I'll close this up and I'll multiply it by, what's the value? 39.59 to get miles, 39.59. So now let's preview this. My new value, this is the distance in miles from each of the center of the census districts to my star. So I'll hit close and I'll say distance, I'll just say in miles. Okay. So now I have that calculated. Let's go ahead and add a filter in here in my text area. And so I'll add this, I'll hit enter here, I'll add a filter and distance in miles right there. Okay, that's the slider value. So, okay, now if I adjust this, I'm only gonna get the values that are closest to my star. Let's make this a little bit bigger and zoom in. Okay, so if I change this, I copy my map coordinates and I move it to here, it'll only do the values that are that distance from the star at that location. So that's it for today. Hopefully this helps you with your analysis. I think this is really powerful. These capabilities have been in Spotfire for a long time, and I hope it adds value to your analysis. Join us next time. Thanks.